Tokyo hides thousands of rooms, and each room keeps a story no one tells. They say that if a phone rings past midnight in an empty apartment, you must never answer it. Because sometimes, it isn't a wrong number. Sometimes, the one calling is not among the living. In 2003, a strange case spread quietly across Tokyo. About an old apartment where tenants vanished one after another, each leaving behind a black phone that should not have worked. This story follows one of them. A young man who answered a call that never should have been made. A call from beyond the boundary of death. A call that connected two souls through the same cursed line. Greater than, can you hear me? Once you hear that voice, the call never ends. Chapter 1, The Room 203. Tokyo was unusually bleak that October. A cold rain had been falling since morning, draping the narrow alleys of Nakano in a veil of gray mist. A Vietnamese student who had only been in Japan for 2 months, climbed the damp, narrow stairway of the Kurosawa Heights apartment complex. He had just rented a tiny room there, room 203, for a price that seemed almost suspiciously cheap. The 3-story building was old, its walls cracked and its paint peeling. The hallway was dim and narrow, the fluorescent lights flickering with a faint buzz. When he stopped in front of his new door, the air grew cold, almost as if the chill was leaking out from inside. He turned the key, the wooden door groaned open with a long, weary creak. The room inside was nearly empty. A small wooden table, a tatami mat yellowed with age, and in the corner by the window, a black rotary telephone, covered in dust. Its cord had been cut. Clearly, it hadn't been used in years. And picked it up, brushed the dust off, and gave a little laugh. Greater than, well, at least there's a phone. Not that it still works. He set it back down. Outside, the rain struck the tin roof in a dull rhythm. The tap dripped in the kitchenette, plink, 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 a lonely sound echoing through the empty room. That first night, and couldn't sleep. The old floorboards creaked under every breath he took. The clock read 2:33 a.m. when he pulled the blanket over his head and tried to shut his eyes. Then, RRRRING, RRRRING, RRRRING. The phone rang. The sound was muffled, hollow, like it was coming from underground. The hairs on his arms stood on end and sat up sharply. The phone in the corner was ringing. The same phone that had no cord attached. After a few seconds, it went silent. Only the pounding of his heartbeat filled the silence that followed. He swallowed hard, whispering to himself. Greater than, must have been my imagination. Maybe it was a clock or something. But the next night, again at 2:33 a.m., the phone rang. This time, the ringing lasted longer, frantic, desperate, as though someone was calling from far, far away. With trembling fingers, and lifted the receiver. Static hissed through the line. Then, a voice. Weak, broken, and distant. Greater than, can you hear me? And froze. The breathing on the line grew louder, wet, uneven. He tried to steady his voice. Greater than, who is this? You got the wrong number. A long silence. Then the same voice whispered. Closer, colder, right into his ear. Greater than, I'm right, behind you. And spun around. Behind him, only the pale wall and the faint outline of his own shadow. But there was a smell in the air now, sharp, acrid, like burnt hair. Chapter 2, The 2:33 Call. The morning after the first night, and cleaned the room. He took the black phone, wrapped the cord, and shoved it deep inside a drawer, as though burying a memory he didn't want to remember. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him every time he turned away. That afternoon, the landlady, a thin, elderly woman with hollow eyes, came to collect the rent. Trying to sound casual, and joked. Greater than, ma'am, the phone in my room still works somehow, even though the cord's been cut. The woman stopped counting the bills. Her hands froze. She looked up at him with that same distant stare, and said softly, Greater than, if it rings, don't answer it. Just let it ring. Her voice was rough, almost like a whisper through dust. Before he could ask more, She turned and walked down the hall, her footsteps fading into the dim corridor. That night, In stayed up late studying. The yellow light from his desk lamp trembled on the walls, stretching and warping his shadow. Outside, the wind moaned through the cracks of the old building, and rain began to fall again, tapping against the glass like fingertips. The clock ticked toward midnight. 2:31, 2:32. Then, RRRRING, RRRRING, RRRRING. The sound came from inside the drawer and froze. The ringing was muffled but clear, slow, deliberate, each chime echoing through the room like a heartbeat. He stood up, heart hammering in his chest, and walked toward the drawer. With shaking hands, he slid it open. The phone was glowing faintly red. Its light pulsed with the same rhythm as his breath. He swallowed and lifted the receiver. A thin static filled his ear, followed by a faint, steady dripping sound, drip, 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 as if water was falling in some faraway place. Then came the voice. Weak, familiar. Greater than, "Can you hear me?" Anne's voice trembled. Greater than, "Who is this? What do you want?" Greater than, "I'm so cold. Please, don't hang up." The voice sounded closer now, not distant anymore, but inside the room. Anne's breath caught in his throat. Greater than, "Where are you? Who are you?" Silence. Then, a faint laugh, broken, wet. Greater than, "Right behind you." The desk lamp flickered once and went out. The room was swallowed by darkness. Only the dim red glow of the phone remained, casting faint light across the wall. And on that wall was the shadow of a woman, long hair clinging to her shoulders, head tilted at an unnatural angle, and screamed and hurled the receiver to the floor. The lights flickered back on, the shadow vanished. The phone lay motionless, its glow fading. But from the earpiece, still lying on the ground, came one final whisper, so faint it barely existed. Greater than, "You heard me now? I'm not going anywhere." Chapter 3. The neighbor in room 202. When Anne woke the next morning, his body felt heavy and his mind hollow. He hadn't slept a single hour. The phone, which he had thrown onto the floor in panic, now sat neatly back on the table, its receiver in place, its cord perfectly arranged. He stared at it for a long moment. He was sure he'd thrown it. He was sure. Outside, faint footsteps echoed down the hallway. A door creaked open next door, room 202. A young woman stepped out. Slim, pale, wearing a white sweater. Her hair was long, black, and still damp. When she saw him, she smiled politely. Greater than, "You just moved in, right?" Her voice was soft, like the wind. Greater than, "Yes," and replied, "Room 203, and you are?" Greater than, "Room 202. She said, "Yuki." She had a calmness about her, a quiet sadness. They spoke a little, about rent, the weather, the old building. But when Anne mentioned the phone ringing at night, Yuki's smile froze. Her expression darkened, just for a second. Greater than, "You heard it too?" she whispered. And blinked. Greater than, "Too? What do you mean?" Yuki glanced down the empty corridor before leaning closer. Greater than, "The last person who lived in your room said the same thing. She heard the phone ringing every night during the rain. Then she disappeared. The police never found her body. Only the phone, burned, covered in dust and hair." A chill ran down Anne's spine. He turned toward his door, noticing something he hadn't before. A small burn mark near the handle, shaped faintly like a human hand. That night, the air inside room 203 felt heavier than usual. The rain had stopped, but the smell of moisture lingered. And sat by his desk, unable to focus on his notes. Through the thin wall, he could hear faint sounds from next door, soft tapping, maybe typing. He smiled a little, so Yuki was still awake too. He looked out the window. Across the narrow gap between the two rooms, Yuki's curtains were drawn. Then suddenly, a flicker of blue light glowed behind them. It looked like the faint light from a phone screen. For a moment, Anne saw her silhouette, sitting still, back to the window, holding a phone to her ear. She wasn't speaking. She was listening. Then, as if sensing his gaze, she slowly turned her head toward the window. Her eyes caught the light, cold, glassy, and hollow. Later that night, the silence was broken by a faint knocking. 3 taps, tock, 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 coming from the wall behind En's bed. He froze, then whispered, "Greater than, Yuki, is that you?" No answer. Then another 3 knocks. 3 short, then 3 again. The rhythm was deliberate, almost like a signal. En exhaled, relieved. "Maybe she can't sleep either," he murmured, and gently knocked back. Silence. Then Yuki's voice came through the wall, soft, trembling. "Greater than, and don't answer. I'm not the one knocking." And before he could move, the wall behind him shuddered, and 3 heavy knocks echoed again, this time from inside the wall itself. Chapter 4, the last recording. The rain had not stopped for days. Tokyo was wrapped in a gray veil that blurred the line between sky and earth. The air around room 203 smelled of mold and something faintly metallic. And hadn't seen Yuki since the night of the knocking. Her door remained closed, the curtains drawn tight. More than once he had thought of knocking, of asking if she was all right. But each time his hand reached the door, he froze, afraid of hearing an answer. While cleaning the bottom drawer of the old desk that afternoon, he found a small cardboard box. Inside were a few yellowed papers and a cassette tape, its label scrawled in fading Japanese. "Greater than, Denwa no koe," the voice on the phone. There was an old tape recorder on the table, coated in dust, and put in new batteries and pressed play. At first, there was only static, a long hiss, like wind leaking through an empty room. Then a faint breathing. And after that, a trembling woman's voice. "Greater than, I can't get out. They keep calling me, every night, through the phone." En's blood turned cold. It was the same voice he had heard through the receiver. The same cadence, the same despair. Her breathing quickened. Somewhere in the distance, a phone rang, muffled by static. "Greater than, please don't answer. If you hear me, it's already too late." A scraping noise followed, nails clawing against wood, and then a stifled scream that cut off mid-breath. The tape went silent for a moment, and then played again on its own. This time, the voice was not hers. "Greater than, and you can hear me, can't you?" He flinched. It was his own voice, weary, distorted, echoing back from the machine. And slammed the stop button, threw the cassette across the room. For a heartbeat, everything was silent. Then, from inside the tape recorder, though it was off, came the faint chime of a telephone. Ring, rrring, rrring. The black phone on the table lit up again. The red indicator glowed like an ember. And backed away. From the receiver came the sound of water dripping, a faint sob, and then a warped whisper. "Greater than, you played it back. So now, you'll hear what I heard." The tape began rewinding itself. At the same time, the phone rang backward, the tone spinning in reverse like time folding in on itself. Panicking, En yanked the batteries out, tore the cord from the wall, but when he opened the trash bin to throw everything away, it was empty. No tape, no recorder. Only a small piece of wet paper lying at the bottom, the ink smeared but legible. "Greater than, don't stop the tape halfway. They'll know where you are." Chapter 5, the knocking inside the wall. The third night in room 203. The rain still hadn't stopped. Water kept dripping somewhere in the building, steady and hollow, as if counting down to something. And sat hunched over the desk, eyes sunken from lack of sleep. Every time he looked toward the corner of the room, the black telephone seemed to watch him back. Yuki hadn't appeared in 2 days. The door of 202 stayed locked, the light beneath it dark. The whole floor felt abandoned, only the smell of damp wood and the echo of his own breathing remained. Around 2 a.m., just as he was about to lie down, a sound came. Tock, tock, tock. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate, from the wall behind his bed. At first he thought it was Yuki, but then the rhythm changed, slower, heavier, each impact echoing from inside the wall, not through it. He sat up, heart thudding. Leaning close, he pressed his ear to the plaster. Talk, talk, pause, talk? 3 short, 1 long. It wasn't random, it was a pattern. Almost like someone trying to speak in Morse code. And grabbed his phone, searched quickly. 3 short, 1 long, the letter V. He hesitated, then tapped back on the wall with his knuckles. 3 short, 1 long. Silence. Then 2 short, 1 long, U. V. U, he whispered. Vu? Or? He tapped again, softly. Is someone there? No answer, only another knock. Closer now, and a faint flutter of paper falling to the floor. A damp slip had slid out from the crack near the baseboard. He unfolded it with trembling fingers. Scrawled in smeared Japanese ink were 2 words. Greater than, Mitsuketa, find me. Dash dash dash. He fetched a flashlight and traced the wall. Near the closet, 1 wooden panel had a thin vertical crack, just wide enough to feel a draft seeping through. The air that leaked out was icy and reeked of rot, damp dust, and burnt hair. He wedged his fingers into the crack. A piece of plaster broke away, revealing a narrow hollow space inside the wall. He aimed the light in and saw something glinting faintly. He reached in. The air inside felt wet and freezing. His fingertips touched something smooth and soft, then solid. He pulled it out. A wax hand. Its fingers were scorched black. A scrap of fabric clung to the wrist, embroidered with a single letter, Y. At that moment, the telephone rang. The sound tore through the silence like a scream. Startled, and dropped the hand, it hit the floor with a dull thud and rolled toward the corner. He turned. The red light on the phone was glowing, brighter than ever. He didn't want to answer, but the ringing wouldn't stop. Finally, trembling, he lifted the receiver. There was no voice, only the same knocking rhythm, echoing through the line. V, U. Then a distorted whisper crawled through the static. Greater than, find me, behind the wall. The wall behind him shuddered violently. Black water began seeping from the crack, trickling down to the floor, carrying a sweet, metallic stench that made him gag. And screamed, yanked the cord from the wall, and hurled the phone across the room. But it kept ringing, over and over. And in the reflection of the mirror by the desk, he saw a pale hand pushing out of the wall, fingers twitching in the red glow. Chapter 6: The Erased Photographs. After the night of the knocking, and moved through room 203 like a sleepwalker. The smell of rot still lingered, no matter how many windows he opened. Every drop of water, every creak of the floor sounded like someone whispering his name. While sweeping under the tatami mat that morning, he found a small metal box. Its lid rusted shut. Inside was an old Nikon film camera, heavy and cold to the touch, and a nearly finished roll of film. Out of curiosity, he took it to a small photo shop near Nakano Station. The old shopkeeper squinted at the film, his fingers trembling slightly. Greater than, this film is ancient, he muttered, at least 10 years old, but I can try. 3 days later, and returned. The man handed him an envelope without meeting his eyes. Greater than, please, he said quietly, don't bring things like this here again. They don't feel right. Dash dash dash. On the train home, and opened the envelope. 13 photos. All in black and white, grainy, overexposed. Most were simple: walls, floorboards, corners of the room, the ceiling fan. But in several shots appeared a young woman, long hair hanging wet across her face. Her figure blurred by dim light. The 10th photo made his hands go cold. Someone had taken it from inside room 203, from the same angle as his study desk. And behind the subject, behind where he now sat, was a faint second silhouette standing against the wall. Head tilted, face hidden in shadow. Dash dash dash. That night, unable to resist, and tried taking pictures of the room with his phone. He turned on the flash, moving slowly from corner to corner, the desk, the wall, the window. Everything looked normal. But when he opened the gallery, all the photos had vanished, replaced by a single image file. Named DSC203.jpg. He opened it. It was one of his photos, the same corner near the closet. Except in this one, a woman stood there, her back to him, hair dripping, one hand pressed flat against the wall. The caption under the image, in pale text, read, "Greater than, I'm here." Panicked, and deleted the photo. Seconds later, it reappeared. Same name, same image. But now, new words glowed faintly beneath it. "Greater than, behind you." He threw the phone onto the table. The next day, and knocked on Yuki's door. No answer. The handle was cold, covered in dust. He hesitated, then pushed it slightly. It opened. The room was completely dark. A faint bluish glow spilled from the inside, the same ghostly light he'd seen before through her curtains. "Greater than, Yuki," he whispered. No response. On the desk by the window lay a stack of photographs. They were the same ones he had developed, the same angles, the same frames. But at the bottom of the pile was one more picture. A shot of him, taken from behind, sitting at his desk, staring at the wall. Across the bottom, in shaky red handwriting, it said, "Greater than, if you see me in your photos. It means I'm standing behind you." The door slammed shut. The room went dark. An's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, the screen flashing. "Greater than incoming call. Yuki, room 202. Chapter 7, October 17th. Morning in Tokyo. Gray clouds hung low, and the wind that slid through the narrow alleys of Kurosawa Heights carried the smell of rust and old rain. When An opened his eyes, he felt wrong. Not tired, but displaced. As though he'd been living the same morning again and again. The calendar on the wall had fallen overnight. He picked it up, smoothing out the damp paper. A red circle marked the date. October 17th. His breath caught. That was the day he had moved in. And, if he remembered Yuki's story correctly, it was also the day the previous tenant had vanished. The same day, 2 years earlier. A coincidence, or something worse? Trying to shake the thought, and went downstairs to the landlady's office. The old woman sat by the window, watering her plants. When he asked about the last tenant, she didn't answer right away. She stared out at the rain for a long time, then said in a voice dry as paper, "Greater than, her name was Yuki. She lived in room 203. 2 years ago today, at exactly 2:33 in the morning, she called the police. They recorded the call." The woman looked up at him, her eyes dim and empty. Greater than, all they heard was the phone ringing. And a voice repeating, "Can you hear me?" And felt his chest tighten. "Greater than, that's impossible," he said. "Yuki lives next door, in 202. I talk to her all the time." The woman frowned. "Greater than, no one lives in 202. That room's been empty for 2 years. And ran upstairs. The hallway was silent. The door to room 202 looked the same, plain. White, locked. He knocked. "Greater than, Yuki, please, open the door." Silence. Then, faintly, from the other side, "Greater than, can you hear me?" His hand froze. That voice. That exact, broken rhythm. He looked down at his phone. The screen glowed, 2:33 a.m. But outside, the sun was still shining through the hall window. The fluorescent light above him flickered, buzzing faintly. The air turned heavy, so thick he could barely breathe. He stumbled back into his own room, slammed the door shut. But the moment he did, the room was dark, as if the world outside no longer existed. On the desk, the black phone lit up again. The screen showed a string of digits. The 17th of October 2023, 2 hours 33 minutes and 17 seconds. He picked up the receiver. Yuki's voice, soft, trembling, came through. "Greater than, that night, I called you. 2 years ago. And tonight, it's your turn to call me." The walls vibrated with a low hum. The calendar pages ripped from the wall, fluttering through the air like pale leaves. When they landed, every single page bore the same date, October 17th. There was no 18th, no next day. Desperate, and opened his phone's call log. There it was. One incoming call. Time-stamped 2:33 a.m., from an unknown number. The name displayed in old, glitching Japanese characters. Greater than Yuki. That night, rain began again. The light in room 203 went dark. But across the hall, in 202, a faint blue glow appeared through the curtains. The glow of a phone screen. Inside, the silhouette of a woman sat by the window, phone pressed to her ear. Listening. Greater than, can you hear me? Chapter 8, the cordless phone. And didn't sleep after that night. Even when morning came, he could still hear the faint hum of the phone in his ears. The way it had breathed between each ring. He packed in silence, clothes, papers, passport, anything that would fit. When he zipped the bag shut, his eyes fell on the black phone sitting motionless on the desk. Its surface was cracked, its cord already cut, one corner blackened by burn marks. And yet, somehow, it seemed alive. He grabbed it, marched out of the room, and headed down the narrow stairs. Outside, the rain poured harder than ever. At the first intersection, and stopped by a trash bin. Without thinking, he tossed the phone in. It landed with a hollow clunk. He stared at it for a moment, part relief, part disbelief, then walked away without looking back. The clock on a nearby store flickered, 2:33 p.m. That night, he checked into a cheap apartment near Shinjuku. A small room, white walls, fluorescent light. No smell of mold, no creaking floors. Just quiet, a kind of silence he'd forgotten existed. He showered, unpacked, sat by the window, breathing easier for the first time in weeks. But when he opened his suitcase to put away his clothes, he froze. There it was. The black phone, resting neatly between his shirts. No cord. No plug. But the tiny red indicator light blinked once. Like a heartbeat. And stepped back, panic prickling under his skin. He snatched the thing up and threw it to the floor. It didn't break. Instead, it rang. The sound filled the room, sharp, metallic, echoing like a scream that had been buried too long. Greater than, stop calling me, he shouted. The ringing grew louder, until it almost shook the air itself. Finally, and picked it up and pressed it to his ear. Static. And then, a voice. Greater than, you threw me away, the woman said softly. But I've been with you, ever since that first ring. His throat went dry. Greater than, what do you want from me? Greater than, nothing. Just one call. It's your turn now, to call me back. Then click. The line went dead. The plastic casing began to smoke, the faint smell of burnt wires spreading through the room. Panicking, and opened the window and hurled it out. It disappeared into the dark alley below. He slumped to the floor, heart racing. But seconds later, his cell phone vibrated on the table. Unknown number. Screen flashing with a message. Greater than, call from 203. He froze. The phone rang again. This time, there was no number. Just a single glowing digit, 233. He pressed decline. The ringing stopped, for a moment. Then the screen lit up by itself. Switching to camera mode. The image showed his room, from behind him. In the reflection, a woman stood in the corner, hair soaked, holding the black phone to her ear. Greater than, can you hear me? She whispered. And screamed and threw the phone against the wall. The lights flickered, then went out. But the ringing didn't stop. It was coming from his suitcase. He opened it slowly. Inside, nothing, except for the receiver of the black phone. Its cord severed, lying among his clothes. From the speaker came the faint sound of breathing, slow, labored, like someone drowning. Then the voice again. Greater than, next time, if you don't answer, I'll come to you. Chapter 9, the reverse call. The next 3 nights were silent. No calls. No knocks. No shadows. But he couldn't rest. He could feel something humming beneath the silence, like static behind a muted television. He knew the quiet wasn't peace. It was waiting. He turned on his phone. In the call history, there was only one entry, repeating dozens of times. Incoming call 203 to 2:33 a.m. 66 times. His fingers trembled as he stared at the number. Yuki's voice echoed in his head. Greater than, your turn, to call me back. He hesitated, then pressed call. Dash dash dash. The tone rang. Beep, beep, beep. The sound stretched on forever. Then, a click. Someone answered. Greater than, hello? And froze. Because the voice that spoke was his own. Weary, hollow, the same cadence, the same breath. Greater than, who's there? He whispered. Who are you? Greater than, you know who I am. The voice said calmly. You called me. Greater than, that's not possible. And whispered, this is my number. A faint laugh. Greater than, you've already crossed the line. N. When you call back, the call goes both ways. The line hissed with static, then shifted, the faint sound of dripping water and slow footsteps echoing through the receiver. Greater than, you shouldn't have answered me. The other voice murmured. Now you're in the same place I am. Greater than, where are you? Greater than, behind the wall. Behind the mirror. Inside the signal. Dash dash dash. A loud thud came from the hallway outside. And turned. The door of room 203 was shaking violently. Though no one was there. Greater than, stop it, he shouted into the phone. What do you want? The voice on the line replied, almost tenderly. Greater than, I want to finish the call. The floorboards creaked. Something moved in the darkness behind him, the sound of a wet foot dragging across wood. He clutched the phone tighter, pressed it to his ear. Greater than, Yuki. No answer. Just the same voice as before, his own, whispering now. Right next to his ear instead of through the phone. Greater than, you've called me. Now, I can come through. The walls around him began to ripple, soft as flesh. From inside the plaster came faint shapes, handprints, faces pressing out, the texture bending like fabric. The air reeked of iron and mildew. He screamed, threw the phone away, but it didn't hit the ground. It hung midair, the receiver dangling, and from the speaker came his voice again, distorted and distant. Greater than, the call is complete. Then click. Darkness. Dash dash dash. When and woke, the room was still. Morning light slipped through the blinds. Everything looked normal, except the phone on the table, now perfectly placed again. Its display read, greater than missed call. And, received. Chapter 10 The Room Below. 3 days passed after the reverse call. The phone no longer rang. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. Even the sound of dripping water had stopped. But silence, and realized, was not peace. It was the pause between two breaths. Sometimes, in the mirror, his reflection lagged behind him by a heartbeat, blinking a second too late. Smiling when he did not. Dash dash dash. That evening, someone knocked at his door. 3 short knocks, 1 long. He opened it, and froze. Yuki stood there. Her hair hung wet over her shoulders. Her clothes clung to her skin as if she had just stepped out of a river. Her face was pale, her lips blue. Greater than, you haven't gone down there yet, have you? She said softly. Greater than, down where? Greater than, the basement. The place where all the lines begin. Her voice carried no echo, as if the sound existed only inside his head. Dash dash dash. She led him down the corridor, past the mailboxes, past the main stairwell. Behind the storage room, hidden under years of dust, was a metal door sealed by rust. A paper charm, half torn, clung to it. The words written in fading ink. Greater than, Tachirikinchi, do not enter. Yuki handed him a small, ancient key. Greater than, the last person who had this was me, she whispered. The lock gave way with a scream of metal. A blast of cold air rolled out, thick with the stench of iron and something long dead. A narrow staircase spiraled downward into darkness, and turned on his phone's flashlight and followed her. The deeper they went, the colder it became. The walls sweated moisture, their breath fogged in the air. Faint writing covered the concrete walls, scribbled in trembling hands. 17.10233 Don't answer. Find me. They hear through the wire. At the bottom, they reached a small room. No windows. Ceiling low enough to force them to crouch. In the center, under a flickering bulb, stood a long wooden table. On the walls, rows of black telephones. Dozens of them, old rotary models, connected by cords that twisted like veins. Below each one hung a Polaroid photograph. The faces faded by time. And stepped closer. He recognized some of them, strangers. But also Yuki. And at the very end, the last photo, himself. Sitting at his desk. Holding the phone to his ear. Greater than, what is this place? He asked. Yuki's voice was almost tender. Greater than, everyone who ever heard the ringing ends up here. Every call leaves a trace, a face, a voice. You heard it. You answered. Now you belong here too. She placed a cold hand against his cheek. Greater than, stay, so the next person can hear you. One by one, the telephones began to ring. Not all at once, but in sequence. Like a ripple of sound spreading across water. Each ring joined another, until the room vibrated with a chorus of desperate voices. Calling over one another. Pleading, whispering, crying, laughing. And pressed his hands over his ears. Greater than, stop, please stop. But the sound only grew louder. Twisting, merging, a symphony of the dead. On the walls, the Polaroids began to move. Eyes opening. Mouths twitching. Every face calling out in silence. Yuki's voice rose above the noise. Greater than, you called me, so I came. But no one ever hangs up. No one finishes the call. The wall behind her cracked open. Beneath the plaster, coils of electrical wire wrapped around human bones. Black liquid dripping from them, hissing like blood. And stumbled backward. The air turned thick, heavy, electric. Yuki reached out her hand, her voice now overlapping with a dozen others. Greater than, answer the next call. And the lights exploded. Everything went dark. When he opened his eyes, it was morning. The stairwell was gone. The metal door sealed shut once again. Only a small pool of rainwater remained on the floor, and in its center, the black phone, its screen glowing faintly. Greater than, 233 connection established. Chapter 11 The Calling Ritual. And didn't remember how he escaped Kurosawa Heights. He only remembered the sound of ringing, echoing inside his skull even when no phone was near. When he opened his eyes again, he was sitting in a tiny tea house near Suginami Shrine. Rain streaked the window. His hands were still clutching the black phone. The old owner of the shop glanced at it, his wrinkled face turning grim. Greater than, you brought that here? He muttered. That's not yours to carry. It's attached to you now. He slipped a note across the table, written in trembling brush strokes. Greater than, go to Saito-sensei. He deals with the ones who can't stop calling. The exorcist lived in a small shrine hidden behind a grove of bamboo. Inside, the air was thick with incense and dust. Saito was an old man with eyes like dark glass. He listened without interruption as An told his story. When finished, Saito said quietly, Greater than, the telephone is a bridge between worlds. Once you've heard the dead through it, the wire connects both sides. To sever it, you must call back one last time, but within the ritual circle. And when they answer, you must not speak. Not even breathe too loudly. If you respond, the spirit will use your voice to return. That night, Saito prepared the ritual in the shrine's main hall. 4 candles at the corners. A circle of salt drawn on the wooden floor. The black phone placed in the center. Outside, the storm gathered. Thunder rolled over the trees. The flicker of the candles threw long shadows on the paper walls. Greater than, when the phone rings, Saito said, no matter what you hear, do not answer. And nodded. His hands trembled as the old man began chanting. The words were low, guttural, older than any language and new. The temperature dropped. The flame of each candle bent inward. The black phone began to vibrate. Ring, rrring, rrring. The sound didn't echo in the air, it echoed in his bones. Saito chanted louder. Smoke rose from the salt circle as if the ground itself were burning. The ringing grew sharper, metallic. Then, suddenly, it stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the phone picked up by itself. Greater than, can you hear me? Yuki's voice. Faint, sad. It came not from the speaker, but from every corner of the shrine. Saito's eyes widened. Greater than, don't respond, he hissed. But he couldn't stop himself. His throat moved on its own. Greater than, Yuki, where are you? The candles all went out at once. The air froze solid. From the phone came dozens of voices, men, women, children, all whispering over one another. Greater than, we called, you answered? Now it's your turn to listen. The phone began to melt, oozing black liquid that smelled like burnt metal. Saito swung his staff, chanting faster, and struck at the cord with a consecrated blade. The blade snapped in half. From the severed end of the wire poured strands of wet black hair, twisting and coiling like serpents. They shot out, wrapping around En's wrists, tightening. He screamed. Greater than, Yuki, please. Her voice came again, closer, whispering right beside his ear. Greater than, you said you'd listen. So listen now. From the dark, hundreds of pale faces began to form, merging into Yuki's eyes empty, mouths trembling in unison. Saito pressed a burning talisman against En's chest. There was a flash of light, the smell of ash and salt. The hair recoiled, turning to smoke. When the light faded, the shrine was silent again. Saito knelt in the corner, blood running from his nose, his hand still gripping a half-burned charm. On the floor, the phone was cracked open, steaming. From the speaker came a faint, almost human whisper. Greater than, the soul is gone now. In turned to Saito, voice shaking. Greater than, gone? You mean, hers? The old man lifted his hollow eyes. Greater than, no, he said weakly. Yours. Chapter 12 The Truth About Yuki. After the ritual, and drifted in and out of consciousness. He didn't know how long he'd been lying there, hours, maybe days. The world around him seemed faded, like the colors had drained away. Every sound was muffled, as though he were hearing from the bottom of a lake. The phone lay cracked beside him, still faintly pulsing with a dull red light. Every now and then, it gave a shallow click, like a dying heartbeat. He tried to stand. His reflection in the shrine's mirror didn't move at the same time. When he blinked, it stared back, just a fraction of a second too late. By nightfall, and found himself back at Kurosawa Heights. He didn't remember walking there. The building stood dark against the rain, its windows like blind eyes. The second floor smelled of mildew and silence. Room 203 was waiting. When he opened the door, the room looked normal. Clean, bright, almost new. But the moment he stepped inside, the air thickened. He could feel the walls breathing. On the desk, the black phone was whole again. Its screen flickered, showing a message. Greater than, play voicemail the 17th of October 2023 2:33. And pressed play. Static filled the room, followed by a woman's voice, soft, trembling. Greater than, Anne, if you're hearing this, it means I failed. Her voice was clear, human, painfully familiar. Greater than, my name is Yuki. I was a student at your university. I lived in room 203 2 years ago. I called the police that night, and I tried to call you. And froze. Greater than, me? Her voice continued, breaking apart between sobs. Greater than, you gave me your number once. Remember? You said, if I ever needed help, I should call. So I did. I called again and again, but you never picked up. A sound like running water filled the recording. Greater than, someone locked me inside. I thought if I could reach you, I'd be saved. And sank to his knees. His heart thudded painfully. as if the air had turned solid inside his chest. He remembered a missed call, long ago, from an unknown Japanese number. He had listened to a voicemail once, just for a second, and then deleted it. A woman's voice crying for help. He'd thought it was spam. Greater than, you don't remember, do you? But that's all right. Because you heard me, eventually. And when you hear me, you take my place. The walls began to pulse with light. Every surface shimmered like wet glass. The mirror by the window turned black. Anne's reflection blinked at him, then smiled faintly. Behind it, a woman stood, pale, drenched, hair clinging to her face. Yuki. She reached a hand to the glass. Greater than, you finally answered. Anne. You heard my voice. Greater than, Yuki, I'm sorry, he whispered, I should have. Greater than, it doesn't matter. Now I can rest. Because you're here, and I'm not alone anymore. The light dimmed. Her figure began to fade into mist, her voice soft as breath. Greater than, we're connected now. The call won't end. Ever. Something fluttered to the floor, a damp sheet of paper from the wall. And picked it up. It was the rental agreement for room 203. The ink was smeared, but he could still make out two names. Tenant. Nguyen Min In. Guarantor. Yuki Sato. He stared at it, realization dawning like a cold sunrise. 2 years ago, both their names had been on the same form. Only one person was allowed to move in. The landlord had chosen Yuki. She had died here. He had lived instead. The phone clicked softly. Her voice came one last time, faint but peaceful. Greater than, you told me once, if I ever needed help, I should call. So I did. Thank you for finally listening. The screen went dark. The rain outside slowed to a whisper. On the wall, Yuki's reflection smiled one last time, then dissolved into a shape of water, leaving behind a single handprint over Anne's heart. Chapter 13: The Final Call. That night, Tokyo was calm. No rain. No wind. Just the faint hum of distant trains moving through the city. In room 203, the air was still. And sat by the window, the light from the street lamps painting pale patterns across the floor. The room had been cleaned, the walls repaired. But no matter how fresh the air smelled, the silence still breathed like a living thing. On the desk, the black phone waited. He stared at it for a long time. It no longer frightened him. It looked harmless now, almost fragile. The way something does after it's taken everything it wanted. And lifted the receiver. No dial tone. No sound at all. He whispered. Greater than, you're still there, aren't you? A moment later, the red light blinked once. The screen flickered to life with two words. Greater than, call back. He dialed 203. Beep, beep, beep. Then, a faint click. Greater than, Anne. Her voice was soft, trembling. It sounded like she was speaking from a dream. Greater than, I'm here. He said, I'm listening. Greater than, you heard me now. She whispered. So I can finally rest. Greater than, Yuki. He said quietly, I'm sorry. I should have picked up. I should have. Greater than, don't blame yourself. Even if you had answered, the room wouldn't have let me go. The words hung between them like fog. Then she spoke again, her tone lighter, almost peaceful. Greater than, but now, I'm not alone. You're here too. The lights dimmed. The air thickened, filled with the faint scent of rain. The phone glowed faintly in the dark. And looked toward the window. There she was, Yuki, sitting by the glass, her hair glistening like strands of water. She turned her face toward him and smiled. A small, weary smile. Greater than, can you hear me? Greater than, yes, he said, I can. Her form began to fade, the glow of her outline dissolving into the darkness. Her last words drifted through the room like a sigh. Greater than, then that's enough. The line went silent. The phone screen flashed one final message. Greater than call ended 2:33 a.m. The next morning, The landlady checked the rooms. The door to 203 was locked. When she finally opened it, she found it empty. The air smelled faintly of rain and ash. Only the black phone remained on the table, its receiver resting gently on the floor. On the desk lay a single sheet of paper. The writing was faint, smudged with water, but still legible. Greater than, don't delete the strange calls. Sometimes, they're just someone who still needs to be heard. Chapter 14, The New Tenant. 1 month after the disappearance, the second floor of Kurosawa Heights was renovated. The walls were repainted. The floors replaced. The hallway lights, once dim and buzzing, now shone brightly. A small sign was nailed beside the door. Greater than room 203, for rent, low price. A young office worker named Daichi found the listing online. The price was suspiciously cheap, but the photos looked clean, newly repaired. He signed the lease without hesitation. That afternoon, the landlady, the same frail old woman, handed him the key. As Daichi turned to go upstairs, she said quietly, almost to herself, "Greater than, if it rings at night, don't answer. Just let it ring." He laughed awkwardly. "Greater than, does this place still have a landline? That's rare." "Greater than, it does," she said, "but it isn't connected anymore." Room 203 looked simple, even pleasant. Fresh tatami. A faint smell of new paint. Sunlight from the small window filled the room. Only one thing felt out of place, a black phone sitting neatly on the desk. Its cord was broken. Its surface bore tiny burn marks, like something had once melted there. Daichi picked it up. No dial tone. Just a low hum, like wind trapped in a hollow space. He shrugged, set it down, and began unpacking. That night, at 2:33 a.m., Daichi stirred from sleep. Ring. Rrring. The sound was faint at first, so soft he thought he was dreaming. Then it grew clearer, echoing through the quiet apartment. He sat up. The phone on the desk was glowing. "Greater than, weird," he mumbled, "probably an electrical short." He walked over, picked up the receiver. "Greater than, hello?" For a moment, there was only static, and then, a soft woman's voice, trembling through the line. "Greater than, can you hear me?" Daichi frowned. "Greater than, who is this? You got the wrong number." He started to hang up. But before the receiver touched the cradle, the voice whispered again, slower this time, colder, almost beside his ear. "Greater than, I'm right behind you." He turned. The room was empty. Only the curtain swayed gently from a breeze that wasn't there. And yet, on the wall, the shadow of a woman stood perfectly still. Long hair, hand raised to her ear, holding a phone. The next morning, the landlady climbed the stairs to bring up some paperwork. Halfway up, she heard faint ringing. It came from room 203. She stopped at the door, listening. Then, slowly, she sighed, a long, tired sound. "Greater than, again," she whispered. "It's starting again." Chapter 15, The Call from the Dead. 3 nights after Daichi moved in, the neighbors began to complain. They said they could hear a phone ringing all night, even though the electricity to room 203 had not yet been turned on. The sound was faint, echoing through the walls, as if it were ringing from somewhere beneath the floor. When no one answered their knocks, the police were called. They forced the door open at dawn. Inside, the room was perfectly clean. No blood, no sign of struggle. Only a single object on the desk. A black rotary phone, its receiver hanging loose, rocking slightly. The red light blinked steadily. The display read, "Greater than incoming call. Unknown, 2:33 a.m. One of the officers frowned and lifted the receiver. From the other end came a faint breath. And then, a voice. Male. Low. Calm. "Greater than, can you hear me?" The officer blinked. The voice wasn't Japanese, it carried a soft, foreign accent. He asked, "Who is this?" But the line dissolved into static. And when they checked the device, it wasn't connected to anything. The case file later noted, greater than, source of call unknown. Power line cut. Possible residual signal, origin, internal. That night, the building was evacuated. The next morning, room 203 was sealed. But at 2:33 a.m., several tenants reported hearing the phone again. Just once. One long, hollow ring, like something breathing through a wire. Those who dared to press their ear to the wall said they heard two voices inside, whispering softly. Greater than, can you hear me? Yes, I can. Then stay with me. Then silence. Then dripping water. And then, nothing. Months later, Kurosawa Heights was torn down to make way for new apartments. When the construction crew dug into the foundation, they found a sealed concrete room directly beneath where room 203 had been. Inside were dozens of black phones fused into the walls, their cords twisted like veins. In the center of the room were two skeletons. One male, one female, sitting across from each other, hands still clasped together. Between them lay a phone receiver. On the wall above them, someone had scratched a message into the concrete with bare nails. Greater than, we only wanted to hear each other one last time. That evening, when the foreman stayed behind to lock up, he heard a sound echoing through the empty lot. Ring, rrring, rrring. He followed the noise to a pile of broken bricks. Half buried in the dust lay a black phone, cracked, ancient, yet faintly glowing red. He hesitated, then lifted the receiver to his ear. A soft voice spoke, almost smiling. Greater than, can you hear me? They demolished the building years ago. The ground where room 203 once stood is now a convenience store parking lot. But every October 17th, around 2:33 a.m., the store's landline rings. No one answers. No number appears on the screen. Only silence. And, if you listen carefully, the faint sound of dripping water. The clerk says sometimes, just before dawn, the security cameras flicker. For 1 second, two figures appear by the back wall. A man and a woman, sitting opposite each other, both holding a black phone to their ears. Greater than, can you hear me? Yes, I can. Then the feed cuts out. The phone stops ringing. And Tokyo, once again, goes back to sleep.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.